Okay, let's get into this. Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take a cultural artifact. It could be a document, a data set, or in this case, a really raw, just explosive rock song, and we just tear it apart layer by layer to understand the world that created it.
And today we're strapping in. We're going on a trip back to the year 2000, right at the turn of the millennium.
Right.
And our focus is a track that, I mean, more than maybe any other, really captured the sound of generational friction at its absolute boiling point.
Right.
We're talking about Limp Bizkit's My Generation.
From the album with, I think we can all agree, one of the most absurd titles in rock history, Chocolate Starfish and the hot dog flavored water.
You know, that title alone, it's almost the entire thesis statement for the band at that time.
It is. It tells you everything about their strategy. It's aggressive, it's completely absurd, and it's designed to be critique-proof, right?
Exactly. And when you listen to My Generation now, it's, I think, very easy to just dismiss it.
Oh, for sure. Just a loud new metal anthem, full of rage, a bunch of four-letter words, just made to be blasted in an arena.
And this is the key. Once you start digging into the source material around it, the song starts to reveal itself as something, well, something much more. It's like a meticulously engineered sociocultural document.
Okay, so what do you mean by that? A document?
I mean, it's dense. It's packed with these historical and literary paradoxes. It has these geographical anchors that are super specific and localized. And maybe the most surprising part is this truly sophisticated production architecture underneath it all that was just designed for maximum impact.
So our mission today really is to get past the public image, the red Yankee hat, the pure aggression aesthetic.
Right.
We need to unpack that hidden depth, the genuine complexity that allowed this song not just to sell millions, but to really, truly resonate, to become the defining sound for a generation that was just demanding to be heard.
It really does capture the precise zeitgeist of that nu metal peak, and it defines that shift, from the Gen X cynicism of the 90s to this more demanding, almost transactional aggression of the emerging millennials.
And the context for its release is just, it's everything. We're talking about the year 2000.
Yeah.
The dot-com bubble was just about to burst. Technology felt both like a miracle and deeply isolating. And youth culture was under this intense scrutiny.
You're talking post-Woodstock 99, which was a disaster in the media's eyes. You're talking post-Columbine. Society was, frankly, terrified of its own teenagers.
And that anxiety, it fueled the market, didn't it? The album Chocolate Starfish was just a commercial monster.
An absolute monster. It sold over 1 million copies in its first week in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
So this wasn't background noise. This wasn't some niche underground thing. This was the sound of cultural friction, hitting the mainstream, hitting the stadium level. And it was a declaration of war at a time when the band was loved by millions and just, absolutely despised by critics, by media, by parents everywhere.
So we're going to analyze the anatomy of that exact tension.
It's the plan.
Okay, let's start at the source of the sound itself. The band. The Limp Bizkit groove. It was built on this very specific and, like you said, often volatile chemistry between the members.
Yeah, that chemistry is what allowed them to go from, a Florida club act to this globally dominant force. You had a really clear power structure in the band.
Fred Durst at the top.
Fred Durst, the polarizing, hyper-focused leader. He was the conduit, for all that generalized teenage rage. And he understood marketing and how to manufacture confrontation better than almost anyone in rock at the time.
But the music itself, it wasn't just simple rap rock. And that's the key, right? A lot of that comes down to the bizarre, and I mean visually and sonically unique genius of Wes Borland on guitar.
Borland was the artistic chaos agent in the machine. His whole approach was essential to their sound. It wasn't built on, simple power chords or your traditional metal riffs.
Yeah.
The source material actually describes his style as a kind of abrasive minimalism. He loved cut-out notes, these odd, dissonant intervals, and, critically, the strategic use of silence.
He treated the guitar less like a lead instrument and more like a texture.
Exactly, like a piece of industrial machinery or something. His riffs were so eccentric and heavy, they just instantly set Limp Bizkit apart from every other band trying to do that funk metal crossover thing.
And then you have the rhythm section holding down that essential heavy funk and hip-hop foundation.
John Otto on drums. He brought that syncopated hip-hop groove. He's often playing these complex 16th notes that feel more like a classic funk track than a metal one. And then, You have DJ Liesel,
From House of Pain, which is crucial.
a crucial part of their DNA. He provided the turntablism, the samples, the atmospheric textures that really cemented their hybrid identity. It's that mix Borland's abrasive guitar, Otto's syncopated bounce, and Liesel's digital texture. That's what my generation hits with such a unique, almost biomechanical hardness.
And then there's the generation they claim to represent. This is where it gets really interesting, because there's this generational mismatch right at the heart of the song's identity.
Right. Durst was born in 1970. He's technically Generation X.
But his audience, the millions buying that record in 2000, they were overwhelmingly millennials, Gen Y, just coming into their own.
And so Durst becomes this kind of ultimate cultural bridge. He was old enough to remember the grunge cynicism of the early 90s.
But young enough to tap into and co-opt the emerging digital aggression of the late 90s. The sources call him a speaker for the late Gen X and the pre-millennials.
Yeah, and he acknowledges that in the lyrics. He mentions Generation X, but then he immediately gives his collective a new label, a self-chosen one.
Generation Strange.
Generation Strange.
And strange is really the operative word there, isn't it? It's not Generation Angry or Generation Lost, which you might expect. It's strange as an identity of pride. It's a reclamation of their perceived abnormality by a society that just didn't understand them.
Exactly. They are the misfits, they're the outsiders, and they're all grouped under this banner of strangeness. And they're demanding to be recognized precisely because they're strange. They're rejecting all the neat little boxes the media was trying to put them in.
And that demand for identity, it's never clearer than in the song's most famous reference, which ties them into this, 35-year tradition of rock rebellion?
You're talking about The Who, of course.
Of course. The title itself, My Generation, and that iconic stuttered chorus, it's a massive, explicit homage to The Who's 1965 anthem.
It's such a calculated move. He's intentionally placing the band within this grand lineage of youthful revolt. The Who's original, it captured that post-war British youth angst, feeling constrained by the old guard.
Right. And Limp Bizkit is trying to do the same thing, but for the late 90s, early 2000s American youth, they're constrained not by economic hardship, but by societal judgment and this inherited cynicism.
And the sonic link is that stutter. It's what connects them instantly. Roger Daltrey famously saying, people try to put us down.
And Durst copies that phonetically in the chorus. My generation. But the sources, they draw a really sharp distinction between the two performances.
They do. The Who stutter was raw. It was defiant. Durst's, however, is analyzed as sounding, nervous, drugged, anxious. The sources define it as rebeldia rota.
A broken rebellion. That's a fascinating way to put it.
It is. The idea is that the anxiety and the brokenness come from the decades of cultural fragmentation and overwhelming technology that happened between 1965 and 2000.
So the core tension is the same, being judged, being put down, but the response is different.
The response is no longer this pure, unified rebellion. It's mediated by cynicism, by digital isolation, and by a feeling that society is just too big and too broken to fight effectively. So the rebellion itself sounds nervous, broken, and unsure of its own voice.
That idea of a broken identity, it leads us right into another layer of the song's identity, this one anchoring it geographically. I'm talking about the command right in the intro.
John Otto, take him to the Mathews Bridge.
Yes, the Mathews Bridge. This is so important.
It's absolutely critical. It's not some generic name he made up. It's a real cantilever bridge in Jacksonville, Florida, the band's hometown.
So on one level, it's an anchor to their roots, a statement of loyalty. It's like they're refusing to let global success erase their local sort of marginalized origins.
Right. But the symbolic meaning, what the sources call the psychogeography of that bridge, it runs so much deeper than just a hometown shout-out.
Okay, break that down. Why a bridge and why that specific bridge?
So the sources reveal that the Mathews Bridge has a local reputation, has a history of accidents, and tragically, it's a place that's associated with moments of crisis. It's a dangerous, high-stress piece of architecture.
So when Durst orders Otto to take the listener there, it's not just a musical cue.
No, it serves these multiple kind of terrifying functions. Musically, yes, it's a demand for an intense transitional section of the song, the bridge of the song.
Right.
But metaphorically, it instantly transports you, the listener, to this dangerous liminal space. You're on a threshold over an abyss, suspended high above water.
It represents a psyche, or maybe a whole generation, that's at its breaking point, under too much structural load.
Exactly. And it's demanding this risky, high-stakes transition. It is the sound of a structure that is threatening to collapse.
Which makes the heavy, grinding riff that follows the actual sound of that structure under stress.
Precisely. And in doing that, it makes a sonic claim that their local marginalized experience in Jacksonville, a city often culturally overshadowed in the South, is now the universal global story of youth tension. The local becomes universal. And it's inherently dangerous. That's what elevates this from just being an aggressive song to a complex cultural statement.
Okay, so we've got the geography and the sound of the tension established. Now let's get into the lyrics. In this deep dive, we see Fred Durst building what's essentially a cultural collage, you could call it?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. He's legitimizing his generation, not through, academic credentials or high art,
Yeah.
but through a very specific curated set of references from pop culture, literature, and technology.
It's like he's saying, we might be strange, but we have our own canon, our own sacred texts, and they explain our condition better than yours do.
And the first major literary reference he pulls deals directly with this theme of perceived madness and institutional rebellion.
Maybe I'm the one who flew over the cuckoo's nest.
I mean, it's a direct, verifiable link to the Ken Kesey novel and, of course, the huge Milos Forman film.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a classic.
It is. And the central character, Randall McMurphy, he's the ultimate institutionalized rebel. He's the one who challenges the oppressive system, which is embodied by Nurse Ratched. The system says he's insane, but in reality, he's the one exposing how sick the institution itself is.
So Durst, and by extension the entire generation listening to this, they're explicitly identifying with McMurphy.
They are. They're positioning themselves as the sane minority that's trapped inside a sick system.
Yeah.
So the generation's strange behavior, their apathy, their rage, it's not presented as a real mental illness.
Right. It's a sane, logical reaction to a repressive social system that was, at the time, very quick to blame them for all of society's problems.
Especially in the late 90s. So Durst is positioning himself as what the sources call the loco profeta que vio, la verdad del sistema, the mad prophet who saw the truth of the system.
It completely flips the script on who gets blamed. The question isn't, why are you so disturbed? It becomes, why is society so disturbing?
It's a fundamental question of who gets to define sanity corridor in modern society. If the establishment is the one sinking the Titanic, then the people who refuse to follow the rules on the sinking ship are, paradoxically, the most rational actors in the room.
And if the Cuckoo's Nest reference roots the song in this critique of institutions, the very next line yanks it right into the digital reality of the year 2000. And this is where it gets incredibly specific.
We downloaded the Shockwave for all the ladies in the cave. This line is one of the most precisely dated lyrics in rock history. I mean, you couldn't write this 5 years earlier or 5 years later. It wouldn't make sense.
For anyone who doesn't remember, Macromedia Shockwave Flash. That was the dominant platform for web games, for interactive multimedia, for any kind of early streaming content back in 2000.
It carbon dates the song perfectly to that initial dot-com boom when technology was just starting to mediate our most primal behaviors.
And the sources have this fantastic conceptual framework for this line. Paleo-cybernetica sociologica. We definitely need to break that down.
Okay, so it's the collision of the ancient and the futuristic, the primeval and the digital. Let's start with the cave.
The cave.
The cave is that primal, hidden, safe space. It is the dark bedroom of the isolated, screen-gazing adolescent, the place where they can hide from a world that's judging them. It's literally where the sun don't even shine through our window pane, as he sings later.
Okay, so what are the ladies in the cave doing?
They are consuming, creating, and engaging in social interaction, but it's all mediated through these new digital tools, through the Shockwave. You have to remember, in 2000, internet interaction was slow. It was fragmented. It was often anonymous.
You weren't going out to find experience.
No, you were downloading it.
Yeah.
And you were processing it in total isolation.
The source material uses the phrase Neanderthals with broadband. So what does that tell us about the actual quality of the social connection they were downloading? Was it a real community?
It was. Well, it was superficial and it was desperate. The generation is using this cutting-edge technology, the Shockwave, to mediate these really primal impulses, specifically the need to get your groove on.
Which is repeated throughout the song.
Constantly. And that phrase, get your groove on, it suggests a primal, communal, thing-dancing rhythm connection. But the tool they're using to get there is cold and digital. They are engaging in what the sources call hedonismo desesperado.
Desperate hedonism.
Yeah, where technology is just filling the void that's been created by societal isolation. It just perfectly highlights that the generation's real social life was rapidly moving onto the screen and creating this new kind of technologically enabled isolation.
That's a powerful idea. Rebellion, technology, isolation, and primal impulse, all just wrapped up in a single line. But that digital isolation, it quickly leads to a much bigger societal despair, which is captured in the next big metaphor.
The nautical nihilism of verse 2, Captain's drunk, your world is Titanic.
This is the global disaster metaphor, and the blame is placed squarely on the establishment.
Absolutely. The drunk captain symbolizes the complete failure and, the perceived incompetence of the older generation. The baby boomers, the politicians, the corporate leaders, they were the ones driving the ship of society straight towards an iceberg.
And the youth, the generation in the song, they're the third-class passengers. They feel trapped, they feel doomed, and they have no control over where the ship is going.
Civilization itself is the Titanic, and it's sinking because of the hubris and the unchecked consumption of the generation before them. It's the cultural and financial debt that they've inherited.
Okay, but doesn't this framing kind of ignore the fact that the boomers also rebelled against their parents? How does the source material justify this total condemnation without acknowledging that cycle of generational conflict?
That's a really good point, and it's the core difference. The boomer rebellion in the 60s, it often tried to change the institutions, to reform society, to reform government. The new metal generation, on the other hand, inheriting the landscape of the 90s, the fallout from Reaganomics, the rise of extreme media capitalism, they felt the institutions were fundamentally unsavable.
So their condemnation is total because they see the failure as systemic, not just ideological.
Exactly. They aren't trying to steer the ship anymore. They're just documenting the flooding.
Which brings us back to their response to this impending doom, floating on the funk, so get your groove on.
There's that desperate hedonism again. If the rigid, structured world of the adults is sinking, the only possible solution is rhythmic adaptation, cultural escapism.
The groove itself, the funk, the hip-hop bounce of the rhythm section, it becomes the only viable survival strategy.
It's the only thing left amidst this inevitable systemic collapse. Since they can't save the ship, they might as well dance on the deck. And this aggressive, hybrid music becomes their temporary salvation. It's a cultural life raft they can cling to in a world they feel is just fundamentally flawed and failing.
This analysis of desperation, it takes us right to the song's core sociological thesis, the part that's so often dismissed as just, vulgar nihilism.
Right.
I'm talking about the central lyric, the one that defines their entire worldview. We don't give a fuck, and we won't ever give a fuck until you give a fuck about me and my generation.
This is the absolute intellectual and emotional core of the track. And our source material defines it as conditional or transactional nihilism.
Conditional, that's the key word.
It's vital. This is absolutely not the same as saying, I don't care about anything. It is a calculated power move. It's saying, I am withdrawing my emotional investment and my respect from you until you provide validation and stop condemning me.
So the apathy is weaponized. It's a strategic defense mechanism.
It's an emotional threat. It's a psychological negotiation. The sources call it negociación transaccional del reconocimiento, the transactional negotiation of recognition.
And you have to remember the context. This generation felt ignored, misunderstood, and just aggressively attacked by the media and the establishment, especially after things like Columbine, where everyone was blaming music and video games.
The song is a direct response to being demonized. The generation feels attacked, so they withdraw their respect until the system validates them. And the intentional use of the word fuck isn't just for shock value.
No, it's calculated.
It's a calculated obscenity designed to force the establishment, the critics, the parents, the authorities, to pay attention, even if that attention is intensely negative. It's saying, even if you hate me, you are still looking at me, and that is a form of attention that I demand.
It's the classic behavior of a hurt teenager, just magnified to a stadium level. The rage is the shield, but that request for validation, until you give a fuck about me, that's the desperate plea for connection and respect underneath it all.
And this transactional threat creates this fascinating rhetorical device that just preemptively disarms all of the band's critics. It's a critique-proof trap.
Which comes in the pre-chorus. So go ahead and talk shit about me.
The logic here is absolute genius because it's completely circular and airtight. If a music critic or a parent or some cultural commentator hates the song, they call it vulgar or garbage, They immediately and automatically validate the song's central premise.
Which is that the generation is misunderstood, ignored, and unfairly criticized by those in power.
It makes criticism an exercise in total futility. If you criticize the song, you're just feeding the machine.
The critic is trapped. Limp Bizkit was leveraging the culture war that was raging around youth identity. By attacking them, you just proved their point that the establishment doesn't give a fuck about them.
It formalized this ritual of, like, active victimization. And it converted every insult into a form of attention and ultimately into power and sales for the band.
This transactional apathy also seems like a sharp contrast to earlier forms of youth rebellion, doesn't it? I mean, if you look at punk rock or grunge, their apathy often felt more existential.
That's a great point. It was a true sense of doom or an attempt to reject the entire commercial system. Nu metal's apathy here is completely commercial and conditional.
Nirvana might have been truly apathetic.
Right. But Durst's generation is saying, we will stop being apathetic the second you pay us the respect we feel we deserve. It's less existential despair and more like a highly effective economic and emotional strike action.
It's a temporary withdrawal of consent, just waiting for a counteroffer.
Exactly.
So after laying out this huge transactional threat, Durst does something really rare for an anthem like this. He breaks the monologue to talk about blame.
Yeah, the bridge confrontation. Who gets the blame? You get the blame and I get the blame.
That moment feels crucial because it moves beyond simple finger pointing. He's acknowledging a shared culpability.
He is. The youth are violent, they're strange, they're apathetic, sure. But the adults, the drunk captains, they created the sinking ship that led to that state. It's this closed loop of accusation. It's a recognition that both sides are trapped in a failing social contract, and both sides are contributing to the toxicity.
It suggests the problem isn't just one generation against another, it's the cycle of conflict itself.
And the source material points out that the rhythmic repetition of blame, blame, blame is intentionally primitive, like a child's chant. It reflects the childish and repetitive nature of the whole societal debate at the time. Nobody's taking real responsibility. They're just trading accusations inside a failing structure.
But even with all the nihilism and the blame and the sinking ship, the song always comes back to that atmospheric opening, that final, desperate glimmer of hope or at least escape in the bridge.
Do you think we can fly? Well, I do. I do fly.
The song opens with this vulnerable wish, if only we could fly. And it closes with the same question, but he repeats it 3 times, like he's checking for belief, trying to convince himself.
It's an existential question that just cuts through all the rage. After all the aggressive posturing, he admits that the fundamental underlying need is still escape.
So the aggressive music itself becomes the engine for a kind of temporary levitation.
That's it, exactly. The mosh pit, the collective energy of the crowd screaming the lyrics back at him. That becomes the collective catharsis, a form of communal action. The flight isn't a metaphor for individual freedom you achieve through hard work.
No.
It's a metaphor for levitation by means of the crowd. You don't fly over your problems alone. You float, just for a moment, on the massive, unified energy of people who are just as broken as you are. It's a very fragile, very desperate kind of hope.
And what makes all of this deep sociological material really land, what makes it impactful and not just, angry poetry, is the absolute clarity and violence of the sound. This is where we have to get into the forensic production analysis.
Yes. This track isn't just well produced. It's cited by engineers as a benchmark for high-clarity, high-impact nu metal sound.
It's a masterpiece of what the sources call maximalismo controllado.
Controlled maximalism. The sound is gigantic, but every single element has its own distinct space. And we owe that to what you could call the holy trinity of nu metal production that worked on this record.
We're talking about some legendary names here.
We are. Terry Date was the producer. He was the master of that massive, defined, heavy sound for bands like Pantera, Soundgarden, Deftones.
And Andy Wallace was the mixer. His name is on everything that defines 90s and 2000s impact. Nirvana's Nevermind, Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory.
Wallace's signature is all about extreme clarity and separation. He makes sure that even in a super dense, aggressive mix like this, you can still hear every single instrument clearly.
Okay, let's break down that sound, starting with the foundation, the hybrid groove of the drums and the bass. John Otto's drumming is so key because he's playing against type.
Otto brought his jazz training to a metal kit. His patterns blend funk and hip-hop, tons of syncopated 16th notes, subtle ghost notes on the snare, and that's what gives the track that distinctive balance we talked about.
And the production reinforces that duality.
It does. The snare drum is treated for maximum crack. It's often sampled or triggered, with a significant boost, a realce right around those critical upper mid-frequencies of 5 to 7 kilohertz. That's what makes it slice through that wall of guitars and drive the rhythm forward.
And what about that rhythmic trick that makes the chorus sound so much heavier than the verses?
Ah, that is the genius of the halftime snare feel. In the chorus, Otto keeps the tempo fast, but the snare only gets hit hard on the third beat instead of the typical rock and roll 2 and 4.
It creates this powerful feeling of drag or slowing down.
Exactly. It makes the beat feel wider, heavier, and more impactful. It perfectly mimics the emotional weight of the lyrics, that feeling of dragging yourself through a societal crisis.
Then you've got Sam Rivers on bass. The sources call him the invisible cement.
A perfect description. Rivers used 5-string basses tuned way down to drop C sharp, which gives it that thick foundation. His sound is heavily compressed, it's saturated, often with tools like a Sans amp.
So it's dense.
Maximum density and sustain. But his bass lines are simple and potent. He fills in the low-mid frequencies, right where Wes Borland's angular guitar riffs intentionally leave space. It ensures the mix never loses its body, even when the aggression is at 10.
Which brings us to Wes Borland's guitar. It's all about texture and contrast, not just distortion.
Borland completely avoids the constant thick wall of noise you get in a lot of metal. The production team made sure there was a precise duality to his sound. In the verses, you hear these clean, delay-soaked, atmospheric tones.
Creating tension, that feeling of being suspended.
Right. He might use a subtle flanger or a chorus effect there to heighten that tension right before the chorus drops.
And then the chorus hits, and it's just pure impact.
It's the wall of sound, massive double-track distortion, probably from a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, and it's panned hard left and right, 100% stereo separation. And with those low tunings, it just fills this huge low-end space. But the key is articulation. The production emphasizes the sharp percussive quality of his riff, so it's all about rhythmic impact, not just noise.
And Fred Durst's vocal production is just as meticulous, isn't it? It's all designed to maximize that confrontational energy, that illusion of intimacy.
The dynamic contrast is everything. The verses are produced to be incredibly dry and heavily compressed. We're talking a high ratio, maybe 8.1, 10.1.
What does that do?
That extreme compression creates a startling proximity effect. It makes Durst sound like he's whispering or spitting right into your ear. It invades your personal space. It forces that confrontation.
While the choruses are all about pure authority and volume.
Stacked. Double-tracked, maybe even quad-tracked for maximum thickness, layered right on top. But here's the critical technical detail that ties back to the cultural message. That famous generation stutter. It's not a natural performance.
It's edited.
It's achieved through precise digital editing. They're cutting and repeating the audio waveform to create this mechanical, glitch-like feel, a digitized failure of articulation.
So it reinforces the whole Shockwave theme, the digital era.
Exactly. The anxiety of that broken rebellion isn't just emotional, it's mechanized. Communication itself has a glitch in it, reflecting that sense of alienation that was so core to the technological boom of 2000.
Finally, let's talk about Andy Wallace's final mix, the strategy that turned this track into an auditory weapon commercially.
Wallace's technique was all about competitive impact. The overall loudness is extremely high. The dynamic range, or DR, is about 5, which was typical for the beginning of the loudness war in 2000. It was designed to sound louder than everything else on the radio.
He was optimizing for cheap speakers and car stereos, where the actual audience was listening.
100%. And the mix is so aggressively organized. The core impact instruments, the kick, the snare, the lead vocal, are dead center in the sonic image for maximum punch. And then the guitars are panned hard left and right, creating this immense enveloping stereo field that physically pushes the sound out at you.
And where does DJ Lethal's scratching fit into all that chaos?
Lethal's samples and his sharp scratches are surprisingly front-mixed and clear. Wallace's mix makes sure that every single layer, including that digital texture, stays articulated, even when the sound is at its most maximalist. It ensures the sound of the Shockwave generation isn't buried. It's sharp, it's present, and it's designed to literally punch the chest of the listener and guarantee commercial domination.
So after this whole deep dive, after looking at the architecture and the anatomy, it's clear that my generation is so much more than just a loud nu metal footnote.
Oh, absolutely. It's a defining icon of the genre, and it's a densely layered document of Y2K anxiety, of the chaos inherent in that shift between 2 millennia.
It just perfectly captured that friction between the analog and the digital, the cynicism inherited from Gen X.
And the desperate transactional demand for recognition from the emerging millennials. And I think it succeeded because It offered a necessary emotional product,
Hmm.
catharsis without a solution.
Right. It took that collective loneliness of the kid in the dark room, isolated and judged, and it turned it into a communal, arena-sized movement where they would fly. It's only for 4 minutes.
And its influence endures. The fact that a group like the Japanese metal band Baby Metal sampled it over a decade later shows just how potent that specific, carefully engineered blend of funk, hip-hop, aggression, and sociological critique really was.
It was a perfect storm of sonic and social engineering. Limp Bizkit invented this third category, Generation Strange, and then defined it through that conditional contract.
We won't give a fuck until you give a fuck. They formalized the generational standoff.
Which brings us to our provocative closing thought, something for you to explore as you move forward. If Limp Bizkit's generation trapped between the analog chaos of Woodstock 99 and the digital isolation of Shockwave, if they demanded attention through noise, physical aggression, and that stadium rock scream, what is the modern equivalent?
That's the question. Given the rise of pervasive social media, hyper-fragmented online political movements, and the instant nature of digital communication, does the younger generation today still need a massive physical arena rock scream to express their conditional nihilism?
Or is there demand for transactional recognition, that same plea until you give a think about me, now expressed entirely through the digital infrastructure they inherited?
Through viral content, through the algorithmic amplification of collective anger, and through the weaponization of immediate cancellation.
They don't need to fly over the cuckoo's nest in person anymore. They can just log off. Think about that calculated, mechanical, digitally edited stutter the next time you hear it. My generation